but I never grew up knowing anybody who went to prison. I didn't grow up spending time with Black people. You know what I mean? Like have any, I didn't have any context for any of it. I had the context I had was bad people, right? Do bad things and go to bad places, and I didn't have any context for it. Um, so I think my idea of being a lawyer came from this idea that people should get a fair shake, right? People should have the equal opportunity, right? But it didn't go beyond that. There was no kind of concept for what that feels like, what it looks like, and I needed to go and meet people and talk with people and have real experiences working with people.
Welcome to episode 25 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features Amy Barch, the founder and CEO of an incredible reentry organization, Turn 90. She is as knowledgeable as they come on recidivism and how to avoid it. She first started working in prisons while in college, and always learning, she is a true student of the mess that is our criminal justice system. I recently got to meet some participants in her program and witness some of the cognitive behavioral work they do with her, and it was amazing to see her impact firsthand. Amy and I discuss her path to starting Turn 90, what the future holds for the organization, second chance hiring, and much more. Here is Amy Barch on People Are the Answer. Amy, thanks so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
I'm so excited to be here. It's an honor.
Can you start off by telling us where you're based and what your current role is?
Sure. I am based in Charleston, South Carolina, and my current role is a founder and executive director of a nonprofit that's called Turn 90.
Awesome. And what would you say generally motivates you?
That's such a great question. I would say in general, I'm a like go big, go hard, or go home kind of person. So I find myself when I get invested in something, I kind of go all the way with it. So I am generally motivated by looking at the end of it all. That sounds kind of morbid, but I really, at the end of my life, want to feel like I did everything that I could to have a good life, whatever, in all the different areas of my life. So I live with the end in mind a lot, and I approach my life that way. I really want to feel like when it's all said and done, whenever that is, that I feel like I gave it my all. So I guess that, yeah, it sounds a little bit morbid, but I think what motivates me is recognizing that we're here for a limited amount of time. I'm here for a short time, and I want to make the most of my time when I'm here.
I can certainly appreciate that, and certainly a motivator. And you mentioned that you're based in Charleston. Is that where you grew up, or where did you grow up, and what was it like?
I grew up in Northern California. I grew up in a town called Eureka, or most people know Eureka for its relationship to marijuana. And there's a lot of pot growing that happens in Northern California and in Eureka. And I grew up there until I was 12. So Eureka is it's never really sunny and it's never really cold. So I never saw the snow and I never had hot weather there. So, we did the slip and slide when it was like 65, and I remember getting let out of school once because it was snowing. They literally let us out of school because there were snowflakes outside. So it was very foggy and grew up right on the Pacific coast. And I had a great childhood. I had a mom who stayed home and a dad who worked full time and was a doctor. And I had three sisters, and we all got along. And it was very idyllic in many ways. And yeah, I had a great childhood. And then when I was 12, my parents moved to Virginia, and so I spent the latter half of my sort of adolescence and high school years in Virginia, Northern Virginia, outside of DC. And my parents moved because, especially my dad, really wanted to move because he felt like we would have more economic opportunity in Virginia, and he really felt like the area was deteriorating in Northern California, and he really felt like getting older, we would have a better life. And so that's why we moved. Yeah. So I'm like bi-coastal in some ways. Um, but yeah, so then I lived in Virginia for the rest of my childhood.
Nice. It sounds like two very unique experiences. Certainly sounded pretty nice in how you explained Eureka. Did you enjoy your time in Virginia?
I did. I much prefer the warm weather as I'm living in Charleston now. I moved to Charleston for the weather, so I much prefer the warm weather and the four seasons you get in Virginia. It's gorgeous there. And then being outside of DC, my dad was totally right. You know, looking back, we my parents still live in the same town. They live in Winchester, Virginia, which is about an hour and a half outside of DC, and it's just grown and grown and grown ever since we've moved there. And anybody who knows that area just knows that, you know, an hour and a half outside of DC is basically like a DC suburb now. And so my parents got in when the getting was good, and they've stayed in the same house that, you know, with the first house they moved into, they built it, have stayed there. And it used to feel like it was out in the country. And now I recognize like how close it's like, you know, from town and how close they are really to being a DC suburb. So it was a good move on their part. And it's a nice place to go back to. And it's a small town, but I knew I was never gonna make my home there. I was never, you know, gonna be a small town kind of girl. Not that Charleston is a big city now, but I knew that I knew that I was gonna move and have a life someplace else.
Very nice. And for the listeners that don't know, I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and now you're there, and definitely a great place to live, and it was a great place to grow up. And
And
I
now
you've
you
been
and you
there.
left your small town.
I did, yeah. Now I'm in Denver, and I've had some bigger city stops in between, but certainly an awesome place. And have you enjoyed being in Charleston? And how long have you been there now?
I love Charleston. I really, really love it. I've been here since 2010, and I really moved here, like I said, for the weather. It was just one of the factors, but I wanted to live someplace warm. I was kind of burned out in the DC area. I wanted to live someplace that had infrastructure for the kind of work I wanted to do, and I knew that based on my research, I knew there was an issue here with incarceration, and you know, there's the biggest jail in South Carolina is here in Charleston, and I knew there was going to be work for me to do in my field, so that was important. But you know, it's hard in some ways to detach my work here with Turn 90 with my love of Charleston, right? Because I'm so invested in my work and in the population I work for here. I love Charleston, and it's hard to take those two apart. But it was kind of a culture shock when I moved here. You know, I knew that it was called the Low Country, but I didn't fully understand like what that meant coming from, you know, a mountainous region. That I remember the first time I ever went like hiking here. I signed up for like one of the like meetups because I just moved here, didn't really know anybody. I signed up for a meetup, and we went out to like hiking, and I put my hiking boots on, and then we basically walked out to the end of like an over sightseeing area that was basically like you looked out to a swamp, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was a beautiful swamp. You know, and I sort of had like a moment where I realized, right, like, oh yeah, this is where I'm in a different land now. And now I'm in Columbia, right? Because I we opened in Columbia, and so I'm in Columbia now sometimes. And when we go up a hill, when I go up a hill when I'm driving or I'm walking, there's a hill. You know, I take notice. You know, it's like I've clearly been in the Low Country for a long time when I notice a hill, which is funny because I went to college in Seattle where it's incredibly hilly. So, but now I think I'm definitely acclimated to the Low Country of South Carolina. And you know, and it's obviously a very tight knit community here. There's definitely, you know, the good old boy system, you know, is live and well down here. You know, it's a very faith-based community here. So there's a lot that's different about Charleston and about the South, and I just wasn't fully prepared for those things. But yeah, I really it's very easy to live here. I find it's very easy living, and in some ways, because it's so easy to live here, I find that my life, in many ways, is freed up to do the kind of work I want to do, and because so many things are virtual, right? It's kind of nice living in a place that's easy and then allows me to free up the space in my life to accomplish the things that I want to get done.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I'm glad to hear that. Um, you mentioned going to school in Seattle, and I know you had a pretty cool internship while you were in school. Was when you were there, is that when you first got engaged with the criminal justice system, or when did that start?
It did. I left high school not thinking I was going to go to college. I was kind of dabbling. I was a little bit of a wanderer. I was dabbling in community college and kind of just like hanging out with friends and listening to a lot of Bob Marley and sort of skipping class and sort of just thinking that I didn't really want to sort of conform to society's expectations of what, of our sort of the American dream and I felt like it was a ruse, right? And I felt in some ways that it was the smoke and mirrors, right? And I thought that maybe I just won't do that, maybe I'll just decide not to. And so I actually was not going to go to college, and I bought a one-way ticket to Europe instead. And that was the best thing I ever did, really, because it really defined the rest of my life. And I feel so, so grateful that I had people encourage me at that time to go take that time, because I still remember older people, probably who are my age now, telling me then when I was 21, do it now. You won't be able to do it later. You'll have responsibilities. And at 21, it's hard to understand that. But I did hear them, and I did it. And it was honestly, it was one of the most defining experiences of my life, because I I was there for 6 months, and I went by myself, and it was a complete bum around, camping and hostels and backpacking and no itinerary, and really it was really cool. And then I kind of got to the end of my money and decided I was going to stay. Again, I was like, I'm going to really see this thing through and be a bohemian. And I ended up working on this horse farm in southern Spain, and it was like a room and board situation. So I wasn't getting any money. I was just in my room and board taken care of. And yeah, think like, sweeping out stalls and, feeding and watering the horses and cleaning them. And it was very, very beautiful. But I decided that just after a couple months of that, I was kind of done with the horse world. And then I found this hippie village, this commune in the bottom of Spain, this land that has sort of been given to the people. And it was mainly Germans and English people living there. But I mean, like, Jeff, like massive teepees, like 50-person teepees, like children living out there, like farming happening, right? And so I thought I found it, right? Like, this is it. I'm gonna, relinquish, right, all, expectations of sort of like society, to pursue corporate pathway, all that. And I got a tent, I got a sleeping bag, I found my spot, and I'm telling you, I was around the campfire every night and singing Bob Marley and doing the whole thing. And that lasted for about 3 weeks or a month. And really, that was the best experience, because I really realized that I wasn't a hippie. And as it was defined, at least in that place at that time. And I really saw how the folks that were living there they were all consumed by how to survive. They were all consumed by picking olives and making olive oil and picking lemons and trading things, and how they were going to get a buck and how they were going to make it. And it was a lot of scheming and trading. And I thought, oh gosh, that feels even more self-focused. That feels even less value add. Like, I'm even less of a value add, because I had really felt like I didn't want to participate in some ways in this world, right? Of this, like, didn't want to I didn't, in some ways, like participating in this corporate America, I was like subscribing to it, right? But then I realized that by trying to step out of it and not having any way to support myself, I'm just a complete drain. I'm no value add at all. And it was like such a great experience for me. It really was. And so I called my parents and I asked them to give me a plane ticket home, and they did. And I flew home, and I was really a different person. And that was like the defining moment. So I can't say I was introduced to criminal justice right then, but that really was the defining moment where I realized that in order for me to truly participate in society the way I wanted to and show up, the way I wanted to in life, I couldn't retreat from it. I had to engage. I had to participate, and I just had to be thoughtful about how I wanted to participate and how I was going to use my advantage in life, how I was going to use yeah, my privilege, right, in a way that, again, at the end of it, when I die, I feel like I did, what I could do with what I had. So I decided I was going to go to school, and that's really what brought me to the University of Washington. At that point, I applied for the Law Societies and Justice program, so I knew I thought I wanted to do something in law, and I thought I wanted to do something with this, not reentry specifically. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. Truly, I thought I would probably be a lawyer, or yeah. Um, Public defender, maybe, or maybe working with people who were wrongly convicted. And in and then to your question, I did an internship when I was a junior at the University of Washington, and I chose to go in the county jail. They gave me this big long list. There was, I don't know, 100 opportunities to choose from, and I chose the county jail. And I went in and I just fell in love with the whole experience. I really fell in love with it from the very beginning, and I never really left. I just kind of kept going into the jail until I graduated, and I never looked back. I never said I was going to be a lawyer again. I graduated school telling my parents and people I'm going to work in the field of reentry. And in 2006, it's just not as popular, part of the dialogue as it is today. And so it was a little off the beaten path, I think. Um, but I guess I'm a little off the beaten path, so it probably made sense.
I mean, it was awesome that you saw that need at that time and saw your ability to make a difference there. And I forget which of the documentation I was reading prior to our call, but I believe I saw something where you said it felt like you realized you won the genetic lottery compared to some of these other people that weren't so different from you.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's I fell in love with it. I really, um, yeah, it's fun, kind of funny now because I'm so immersed in it now. I try to go back to who I was then as like a 20, whatever, 23-year-old or 24-year-old. Um, but I never grew up knowing anybody who went to prison. I didn't grow up spending time with Black people. You know what I mean? Like have any, I didn't have any context for any of it. I had the context I had was bad people, right? Do bad things and go to bad places, and I didn't have any context for it. Um, so I think my idea of being a lawyer came from this idea that people should get a fair shake, right? People should have the equal opportunity, right? But it didn't go beyond that. There was no kind of concept for what that feels like, what it looks like, and I needed to go and meet people and talk with people and have real experiences working with people and recognizing, and of course it's not just something that happens in a day, but it's a shock. It shocked me, and I never reflected. I mean, again, I was always a little off the. I was always self-reflective, but I didn't fully understand how privileged I was until I walked into the jail and really started working with people um, and recognizing, yeah, and recognizing it. And that's something I've never forgotten. I always work from that place um, of privilege. I mean, that's when you ask me what motivates me. Like that motivates me. It motivates me because I know how much I was given, and I'm not just going to sit back and just enjoy it. I mean, I do enjoy it, but I'm not just going to sit back and not use it for anything.
Yeah,
Like I
absolutely.
have to use it. I feel like you're probably you're similar in that regard. It's
For
like
sure.
we want to use that, and that's what drives us.
Yes, absolutely. Like we're fortunate to have what we do and the opportunities that we have, and we need to help everyone else with that as much as we can.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So, after college, how did you start to gain some of that experience you needed prior to eventually starting your own organization?
I never left college saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna start a nonprofit." Like, I never wanted to start a nonprofit. It was never something that I thought I would do or wanted to do. I worked for a reentry organization coming out of college. I graduated in 2006, and it was tough times when I graduated. It was not a great job market, and it was particularly bad for people coming out like me that I didn't have a law degree, but I was looking for a job in the criminal justice field. And so a lot of the people that were competing for the kinds of jobs that I wanted had a law degree, and so it was really tough to break into the field. And I eventually got a job as a caseworker for a reentry organization in the DC area. And the I have to say, the best thing that came out of that job was I was asked to teach victim impact classes. So the organization was directly across the street from the detention center in Fairfax County. And um, I was asked to go into the jail and teach victim impact classes. And so basically, what that was we would bring in victims of crime into the jail, and the victim would talk about their experiences as a victim and how the crime impacted them. And I would facilitate the discussion. So it was a restorative justice based class. And it was up to me to facilitate a healthy and respectful conversation between people that were incarcerated who also had been victims of crime, right? And then also perpetrators, and then a victim of a crime into this dialogue and discussion. That's a heavy lift for someone who's never taught, has never been in a jail to do real, like, deep and substantive work, right? Like, my work prior to that was in an internship, kind of doing GED prep. I mean, I'm running a whole different world. I'm like running deep, like deep conversations. It was a really heavy lift. It was scary. I was really scared, and I ultimately loved it. I taught that class for 3 years. Worked at and created a whole base of victims of crime that I knew that would come in, and it was just so phenomenally impactful on me to see, the change that was taking place in those conversations. It was really, really cool. I loved it, and it was the most profound experience I had in that organization, especially as somebody who is just coming into the field. Most people aren't having that. Most people that get into reentry are caseworkers, and you're giving out bus passes and pieces of paper, and you're getting clothing closets and book bags and all that kind of stuff, but you're not facilitating conversations between perpetrators and victims of crime in a jail setting. It was really intense.
I mean, it sounds really deep, really intense, incredibly impactful. It reminds me a little bit of a previous guest I had, District Attorney Beth McCann here in Denver. She's got a program called Restorative Denver, and as alternatives to incarceration. And part of that process is the victim, or is the perpetrator and the victim coming together with some mediation and learning, how each feels, and what they can do to make it better, and things like that. And I've seen firsthand how impactful that can be. So I can only imagine. And the fact that you got thrown right into that, I mean, I think that you seem like the type of person that gets that kind of responsibility and rises to the occasion. And so it was probably a really good thing for you.
It was such a great fit too. I love teaching. I didn't know it at the time. Sometimes you just fall into things. Sometimes it's just the way that your life goes. And I just fell into something, and I definitely wasn't good at first. Like, you just have to get comfortable and get good at it and figure out what works. And it's been one of my biggest strengths in Turn 90 over the years, as that coming from getting thrown into a teaching experience like that and learning, because a lot of what we do is therapeutic services here, and big part of that is facilitating, managing groups. And I just have a lot of experience, because I was given that opportunity. And then when I left that organization and came to Charleston, I looked for an organization to get to work for here that was doing reentry work, and I couldn't find one. And so I approached the Charleston County Jail and asked if I could volunteer, and they were hesitant to let me. And I had to. It took me about 6 months of sort of trying different doors to try to get in. But one of the things I was able to do was contact the organization I'd worked for before and ask them if I could use that victim impact curriculum. And they said yes. And so I was able to present that curriculum to the jail here and show them that I knew how to facilitate it. And they agreed to let me in because I had curriculum, and I had basically the backing of an organization that had trained me to do it. So although that the hard part then is that I had to find victims of crime here in Charleston to basically become my new base of people to bring in. So as a volunteer, found victims of crime. Jeff, I don't even remember how I did it. I honestly, I can't remember how I did it, but I found an assault victim, a domestic violence victim, um, a robbery victim, a woman whose daughter had been killed in a drunk driving crash. And so had a group here that would come in the jail with me and speak. And then I ended up expanding that to Columbia. And then I found victims in Columbia too. So I had a group of victims in Columbia and here, and I was running the victim impact classes in both places. So that's actually how I got started with Turn 90 here. So I don't know if I hadn't had that experience at that organization when I first came out. I don't know, would have my life would have taken a different route, or at least the organization would have fundamentally looked differently, I think.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's really cool though that you were able to take what you learned and what you developed at that initial position and take it to, your new home of Charleston. And it's kind of sad to hear how hard it was to be able to volunteer, but I know it's a difficult system.
Yeah. I mean, that's been, I think, one of the recurring themes. And it's interesting, it's not just with me in Turn 90. I think just in many of the things I've done, and I'm sure a lot of us can point to that, is that you have to continue to keep, if you really want to do something, you'll find a way to do it, right? And like you have to just keep, you just have to keep pivoting into it. So um, when I applied to the University of Washington, I didn't get in when I was in Virginia, and I came back from my sabbaticals with a changed heart and mind, and thought, well, I'm going to go pursue these college. Well, I applied to the University of Washington. I didn't get in as an out of state student. I guess they just don't take very many, and I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to get in for sure. Didn't do any research, only applied to one school, and I just decided like I'm getting into this school, and I figured out a way to do it, and that involved me going out there and getting a residency and getting a community college degree. So it would transfer in this whole thing. Right. And it's just like, but I really wanted it, I really wanted it. And I think that if you don't really want it, you're not going to get it. Not real big goals, the big things, like you're just not going to. Um, and I think I've just been willing to continue to, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm unwilling to like relent, And I think that's just part of my nature since I was a kid. I'm like relentless. And people that know me and work with me know it's like, I'm relentless. And yeah, it took me about 6 months at the time to get into that jail. They wanted me to tap into a few already existing programs. And so I tried to give it a shot, and I went in and I sat in on one, and it was not well organized, and I just can't be a part of things that are not well organized. And so I said, oh, well, thanks anyway. Actually, I think maybe I'll just try my own, class. And here I have this curriculum and this, and then it just sort of crickets, and then I had to kind of figure out other people I could talk to in all the roundabout ways. But you're just not going to grow an organization from nothing, right? You're not going to do it unless you're willing to just be relentless.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. And I'm sure it's served the people that you've helped very well, that you've had this relentlessness. And so you got into the Charleston jail system. And then I saw in your bio that you also worked with the Campaign for Fair Sentencing of Youth and the East Cooper Community Outreach.
Yeah, I did. So the fair sentencing of youth was my one stab at working in advocacy in criminal justice. I did that in DC before I left. I I worked for that organization for 3 years. When I said that I did the victim impact classes for, and I did casework for. And what I found when I was there is that I alluded to this already. I mentioned the sort of paper pushing that happens, right? The giving out bus passes or giving out resources. I found that there wasn't a lot of deep work happening, right? It was a referral to a bed. It might have been a bus pass. It might have been a backpack. But fundamentally, and I really knew nothing about recidivism then, right? I just wanted to help people. I didn't know anything about like what it takes to help somebody change, their life, or give people the supports that they need to do it.
It sounds like those were just Band-Aids that they were kind of giving out instead of like really helping to change people and give them real opportunities.
Yeah, and that's been, I've learned so much over the years about that, but at the time that concept only was like it was an inkling of me understanding that I was just working with the same people over and over again, and what I was doing was not helping. And
Mhm.
so at the time, I didn't have any fully formed ideas around it like I do now. But at the time, I just felt like this isn't working. I want to do something more. And I'm always like a catalyst. I'm like, all right, what can we do? Let's start GED classes. Let's start, and the organization's like, stop, Amy. Like, it's not what we do, right? Like, we do like
Right.
charity-based services, right? And so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and work on advocacy. I'm going to really try to do policy advocacy. I'm going to try to change some of the policies and that are upstream of the situations that these folks find themselves when they get to me. And that's when I worked for an organization called the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, which is working to end juvenile life without parole. So kids sentenced to life without parole. And at the time, it was just, it's a national organization. At the time, it was just one woman, and I came in as her second. And I have to say, they have done amazing work. I don't know how many people she has on staff now, but it's awesome. They have changed so many laws and have done such good things. It just wasn't for me. I felt really
Mhm.
disconnected. And so there are so many people that are doing amazing policy and advocacy work, like yourself, right, around drug laws and many other aspects of the
Mhm.
criminal justice system. But I recognize sometimes you learn about what you want to do by what you don't want to do, I
Absolutely.
find. And that was definitely something that was just not up my alley. And I really kind of felt like DC probably wasn't up my alley ultimately, and maybe that was because I just wasn't interested in some of the policy work, and that led me to
Yeah.
Charleston.
Politics are
Yes,
rough.
they are rough. And I mean, the thing I'm in, I'm in aspects of politics here,
You end
right?
up in
Um,
politics, right? When
you
you're
end
just
up,
trying to
you
make
do end up
positive
in it,
change. Yeah.
right? Totally. And I mean, in some ways, we're a little bit of an island here at Turn 90, which is kind of glorious, but no one's ever an island. And so,
Right.
of course, like there's aspects of my works that are political, but I didn't want to work in Capitol Hill. I didn't want to work
Right.
policy issues for my full time job. So I moved here and I worked for another organization here called East Cooper Community Outreach when I first moved here because I couldn't find a reentry organization to get involved in here. I did that for a year, and during that year is when I was also volunteering. So I basically said, you know what, I can't find an organization that I really want to that I want to do deep, meaningful work here. So I'm going to volunteer, and so that was the 6 months to get started. But then when I did get started, like I always say, like don't give me a foothold. Do not give me a foothold. Like if you give me a foothold, like I'm not going to let go. And that's basically what happened is like they gave me a foothold, and I used to think like, oh, they're gonna ask me to stop coming. You know what I mean? But they never did, and I never stopped coming. And one of the things I think all the success that we've ever had has been built around showing up for the men that we work for in like a real way. And that happened in the jail. So I would go into the jail. I would go in twice after I get off work. I would go in twice a week, and I'd bring my little materials and my sticky notes, and I'd bring on my curriculum, and I'd meet victims there. And I would just super show up every time. And I would work with every person like it was the last person on earth. If someone wasn't getting it, we were going to work harder at it. And I was on time, and I advocated for my materials to be there. And if we needed a TV or a video play, like I was getting it. And I was like, took it really seriously. Right. But there was no donors. There was no media. There was no board members. Right. Like there was no accountability at all. But I wouldn't treat that experience any different than if all those things were there. Right. And that's how we are around here in general. Is like, I don't care if we have a guest in the building, if we have media in the building, or if we don't. Like we show up the same way for the guys, no matter what. And it was all of our success has been born out of that approach, which is we love these guys, we care about their success, and it doesn't matter who's watching.
Right.
That's where we're coming from. Um, and so I'm going along my life teaching these classes, and one day I get a summons from a federal judge, and it basically said this judge wants to see you in his federal chambers. So I'm thinking, oh no, like I pissed somebody off. Yeah, they're gonna whatever ask me to stop coming. And I go to his chambers, and he's a very, very kind and lovely person. And he says, I just wanted to meet the woman behind the magic in my courtroom. And he said, all the years I've been doing this, Amy, I have never seen anything like it. And I just wanted to meet you. And so we talked for a while, and he found what was going on. And he said, I've been doing this for a long time. He said, I really feel like you have something here. And while I'll never be able to raise money for you, I will do everything I can to support you. And he said, I would love to see you take this on as a project, something bigger than what you're doing. And so I thought about it, and I talked it over with my family and decided, like, I'm going to go for it. And I remember specifically talking to my sister and saying, I'm not going to be in a worse spot than I am right now. Right. Like, I'm not in love with my job. Right. Like, I'm not doing something that I think is meaningful. And so what? So I quit my job. I start waiting tables and I try to get this thing off the ground. I gave myself 2 years. I remember specifically giving myself 2 years. I said, and if 2 years go by, there's going to be no harm. I'm just going to know a whole bunch more people than I did at the beginning. And so I did it. I quit my job and I went and I got a waitressing job at one of the restaurants. It's no longer there, but it was downtown on Market Street here. And I started just calling everybody and basically all the things you have to do to try to get, a grassroots nonprofit
Yeah.
off the ground.
That's awesome. I love that you gave yourself that timeline and gave yourself the chance and
Right.
believed in yourself enough to do that and take that risk. And
Yeah. I didn't
so
make it though.
yeah,
I didn't make it in 2 years. but once you're already 2 years in, you're like, I can't stop now.
right. No, that makes total sense. And so I'd love to dig in more to the organization. So just to start us off, tell us what Turn 90 is today.
Sure. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that work with men transitioning home from prison. We have 2 locations, one in Charleston and one in Columbia, South Carolina. We have 12 full-time salaried staff, and we run a social enterprise, which is a custom t-shirt screen printing business. And we also provide therapeutic services, so group cognitive behavioral classes and other wraparound support to the men while they're employed here. So we will be employing 120 men coming out of prison this year between the 2 locations, and it's a transitional work center. So all the services are provided from a single site in each of the locations, and it's awesome. The men come in and they clock in, and then they get a whole bunch of support while they're here. And I really feel like having that model where people can come, clock in, they're working. So it's not a handout, right? Like, they are working while they're here. It's their place of employment. I hear them talk sometimes to their friends or family on the phone and they say, I got to go back to work. Or, hey, it's time to clock in for work. Right. And it's like, it's their job. It's not just a program that they're going to go sit in an office and like wait for their number to get called. Nope, you're clocking in. This is where you need to be when you need to be there. And so that's what we do, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for having me at your Columbia facility recently. It was really cool to see just firsthand the work that you're doing. I got to check out the screen printing facility. I got to meet a bunch of the participants, sit in on some of that cognitive behavioral work that you do. And I just, people, from that are as privileged as we are, don't necessarily realize just how hard it is not only to be, in that system that pushed these people into prison in the first place, but then to try to get out when everyone is judging you based on the fact that you have a record. And there's so many barriers, so many things up against them. And sitting in on those behavioral classes, just you're giving these guys tools that most people don't even realize that they really need. And I just, want to commend you. I was awesome to see, and they all took it very seriously, and it was so meaningful to them. I could feel it.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, when you really truly, like, I've had people say this is the first positive thing I've ever been involved in. Right? Like, at like a 45-year-old adult. That's like you and I are saying, this is the first positive thing I've ever been involved in. Like, that is a tragedy, right? But it means so much to these guys to be the first positive place that they've ever been in. I mean, it is just mind blowing to me. And I just feel such a deep sense of responsibility to them to give them that. It's like, man, everybody should have that. Everybody should have a safe place, and they don't have a safe place. And so we become a family. We become their only safe place. And I'm like really big into people out of prison needing their own. I think I talked about this to you about this when you were in my center, which is I really feel like we need specialized services for people coming out of prison that understand their specific needs and are place based, because people need places to feel safe for a period of time so that they can let their defenses down and reacclimate to pro-social living, and an environment where they feel like they can trust before they can keep going. And that's why I'm not subscribing to the whole like pushing people, well, you can go here for this and you can go here for this and you can go here for that. That doesn't help. We just need to let people come to a place that feels safe and secure so people can stop for a second and reacclimate, and at the end, and also like you saw in those classes, are learning the fundamentals of how to identify their feelings, express their feelings, understand other people's feelings, how to appropriately apologize, how to think in different ways, how to brainstorm pro-socially, how to ask for help, how to make a complaint in a workplace. Like all of these things are skills that most of us just take for granted. And these guys, it's like I remember I had one of my students one time tell me these skills are invisible to us. They were always visible to you, but they were like all of a sudden when you see them, you recognize that they've always been there, but you could just never see them. So they're invisible to most of us.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you described that so well in terms of the needs of these individuals and the idea of a safe place. I think that's really, really important. That's something that maybe is not obvious to most people looking at people that are trying to reintegrate into society, but having a place where they can let their guard down and really kind of figure things out is such an awesome thing to provide. So, I certainly thank you for that. Um, and, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's interesting. Like sometimes, just like all of us, we have different defense mechanisms. So some people will act really aggressive, right? And that they're not happy, they don't want to be there, and they don't like it. But it's just they need to like to acclimate, right? And sometimes it takes like we have a new person, we have a person starting again tomorrow in our Columbia center, and this is his third time restarting, and he has this like really cold, like outward affect, and he was in prison for over 20 years, and he's coming back from the third time because had so many issues the first two times, but he's coming back for a reason, right? He's coming back for a reason, right? Like somebody that has a cold affect and who has been violent and was in prison for 20 years doesn't come back for the third time, right? Unless he felt something and needed something, right? That was there that he just couldn't manage the first two times. And then I might have shared this with you when you're with me too, that we just had somebody who came through our Columbia Center and was thinking about ways to commit crimes to go back to prison because he was not able to manage his life. He said it's interesting. People think you're going to be happy when you get out, right? Like you're going to feel good. And he was completely destroyed. He couldn't be around people. He couldn't be around people in public. Everything was overwhelming. Life had moved on. He didn't know how to use a phone. Like he couldn't acclimate. And and he was with us for 4 months and was like a different person. And sometimes people think like, oh wow, 4 months isn't that long. It's not that long. It's not that long. Like, we don't have to do that much. That's the thing. Is like people are resilient. You don't have to do that much, but you do have to make a deep investment, and that looks like really truly caring about people. And so I always think it's so sad that we have to be seen as something special and unique, right? To like really care and show up for people in these ways. It's sad.
Well, it's remarkable, though, what you've been able to create there and the opportunities that you've been able to build. And how long has the organization been around now? I know it started as Turning Leaf before it became Turn 90.
hmm so I quit my job in 2011, and then 12, 13, and 14 were sort of those startup grind years. 15, we got our first funding from the city of Charleston and got our first Turning Leaf Center. And so I guess you could say that was our first year actually providing community-based reentry services to people. So I've been at this now for 10 years, I think 11 years, but we've been providing community reentry services for six. And then we took a really big leap last year in opening the second location. That was huge. That was a pretty big jump for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. It was great to see it in person. I know at one point you took 6 months off from serving to kind of redesign the program.
Yeah, I so our first so my first 3 years when I was just volunteering, I was working with people inside jail. And when people are inside jail, they're not always going to be the person that they are when they get out, right? People are different when they're in confined spaces. And I'm their like best friend and I'm their only outlet, and right, all is well and everybody has to be on time, and um theoretically everybody's sober, and right, like everybody wants to be in your class because they don't want to be sitting in the unit. And so you have a behavior management system and it's called the jail. And so I just really did not understand what it was going to be like when I tried to transfer my work into working with people once they got out. And so I really seriously, I think, overestimated my own skills and abilities and really underestimated the needs of the population I was working with. And I was very naive. I was very much like, if only you just provide people opportunities, like that's all people need is like really like a chance. And so I went into the first couple years of my work with that perspective. And like I remember telling, so the police chief and the mayor were two of my first really solid community partners, and they were backing me publicly, had backed me, given me money, were hiring my guys. And I remember the police chief, who's still a good friend to this day, asking me, "What kind of success do you think you're going to get?" And I seriously, Jeff, told him 100%. 100, we're going to get 100%. And I believed it. I believed it. And that's where my head was at. And so when we first started, I started as an alternative prison program. So if you'll remember, I had the judge who was backing me. So I was very intertwined with the judicial system. And they wanted to use turning leaf as an alternative to prison program. They wanted an option. The courts did, the solicitors, public defenders. And so I negotiated sentences for about 30 men who, on the state and federal side, and they used turning leave as a condition of bond or probation. And so for my first year, I was working with sentenced people. So I worked with them before they got out, and then they came out, and then I worked with them outside as well. And so that was the context for, I think they're going to 100%, is these guys were getting out on probation and bond. So I was like, they're all going to make it. And not only did I negotiate all the sentences for these 30 people, but I got each of them housing if they needed it. I got all of them some kind of transportation. I worked on all their IDs. The whole thing, right? Bikes. The whole thing. We had a center. I negotiated all of them for employment at the city of Charleston. The city of Charleston onboarded all of the guys at the same time in like a massive hiring, that coordinated with their release date. It was just like the whole thing. And it was an absolute nightmare. It was a complete nightmare. Everything that I thought I knew about myself and like the guys I was working for, I just saw it like crumble right in front of my face. It was terrible. Yeah, it was definitely my hardest year ever. That was 2015. And I remember taking a family vacation at the end of 2015. And I remember telling my family, I hope, my mom specifically, Mom, I hope that they stop funding me so that I can just quit, but I don't have to quit. Like, I don't want to publicly quit. I don't want to tell my partners I'm going to quit. I just want them to stop funding me. And then I can just say it's just because I ran out of money. But nobody stopped funding me. So I didn't, and I just like not a quitter. So
That had to be kind of a devastating time for you, but it says a lot that you stuck with it.
Oh, it was so bad. It was really bad. But I have to say, like those, your hardest times, and we all know this. We all know that the hardest times in our life when we get through it become our biggest advantages. Like we all know that. Everyone looks back at their life and they're like, man, it was really terrible to go through that, but I'm such a, you know what I mean, better person for having survived that, right? Everybody does that. Of course, but when we're in it, nobody wants to live in it, right? Nobody wants to be like, okay, cool, you know what, this is gonna make me like a whole much like a better person, right? This is gonna make me a better leader, right? Yeah, well, it was like definitely one of those moments. And so it's funny when people like, one of the common questions you'll get is talk about a failure and how you like work to overcome it, right? I'm like, well, that's forever and ever. I have, one of those like built in right at the beginning of our organizational startup. So yeah, I didn't quit, and it was like a huge failure. And I had to basically go to all my funders and tell them that it wasn't working. I didn't have to. That's the thing, is it was super interesting, Jeff. It's like, and you probably have some sense of this, people want to believe. people want to believe you. People want to believe that, and people like trust me, and they know that my heart's in the right place, and they want it to work, right? And they publicly said it was going to work, and right. And so there was people who are just like, just keep trying, don't change it, just keep, you know what I mean? Just haven't given it enough like chance yet. Like give it a little more time, you know. I'm like, listen, this is not working, you know. And so it was really interesting. Like I could have kept going, I easily could have kept going. Like no one was like looking over my shoulder or anything. But for me, felt like it just comes back to the original reason I started this whole thing. Like I truly want to help people. I cannot live a lie. You know, I can't live a lie for my own self, right? And so I just decided like, no, we've got to really figure out if we can do something different. And so at the time I basically said, I really just don't think there should be an alternative prison program. I really think it should be a reentry program working with people coming out of prison. There has to be a fundamental, like, initial desire to want to do something different, and we can build on that. And so one of my board members hired this gentleman whose name is David Hunter, and he's a strategic planner, and he does theory of change work, and he's fabulous. He's so great. And I was scared to death because I heard he has this reputation of being like a really big hard ass. And like he would like come in and like destroy people. And he would like destroy the executive director and, you know, publicly like shame you. And I was like, oh my God, you know, I'm gonna get cremated by this guy. And I heard he would like get up in the middle of the sessions and be like, I can't work with you guys. You know what I mean? Like if you can't come to an agreement, like I'll just refund my money. I'll fly home, you know? And which he actually does. But but anyway, so he came in, and and he and I just got along so well. That's how he is. He does do that, and he actually did that in one of our sessions. But it was never with me. It was always with like our community partners. We had like 25 community partners come in, and everybody like wanted a stake in it, you know. And he at that point, I had become very interested in recidivism research, and had done a lot of research in recidivism. I had visited organizations around the country, and also the College of Charleston had given me access to their database. I'd read a ton on criminological theory and programmatic application of that theory, and then was testing it out. And so I knew a lot. And so when he was asking questions, I really actually knew the answers, and he really respected me for that. And so he and I became very simpatico, and we still email back and forth. That was in 2016, and we still work together sometimes. And he still asks me for my professional opinion about criminal justice work, and he's really great. And he helped my team see that we needed to make a change, and we just couldn't keep going down the path. He would say, "Your expert sitting in the room, and she's telling you." You need, you know what I mean? You need to change it. And they needed to hear it from somebody else, you know? And so at that moment, we decided to take a turn into doing reentry work. And so because we stopped doing the alternative prison work, we needed to take a break so that we could create a new model, and also then start recruiting people coming out of prison, and and stop with the jail-based work. And the other thing that he said was that you're underfunded, and you're underskilled for the kind of work you're doing. You're talking about working with the highest risk people, and there's two of you. There's two of you, right? Like you have no money, you have no resources. Like you have to fix that. And so I went back to my funders and I said, hey, listen. So I know that idea I had that I sold you on before didn't work, but really now I have a different idea, but I'm going to need more money to make it happen. Like, what do you say? And they all said, sure, we're going to do that for you. And so I raised money during the 6-month hiatus and hired a third staff member who still works with me today. He's my program manager here. And he was amazing. This guy moved his family from Charlotte to take this job. I was like, listen, I got 3 months of cash, basically. Like, what do you think? And he said, I'm in. So he moved his family, his wife and his 3 children, from Charlotte here to work with me based on what my dream, right? And is still working with me today. And I remember going out, and I was like scared to death that nobody was going to enroll. I was like, oh my God, no one's going to enroll. Like I have nothing. I have a center that basically is like a dilapidated building that has desks in it for a classroom. It has one office, 2 single stall bathrooms, and the city that's saying that they're going to hire people once they complete this thing, right? Like that's it. That's all we had. I could give people a stipend check for their time in class, but that was all the resources we had. And so I would go out into like the communities here, and I would put up flyers on the bus stops, and I would hand flyers out in neighborhoods, like trying to recruit people to come into to turn 90 to take these classes, and then we could do job places with it. Was 8 weeks of half day classes, and then we would place you in a job at the city of Charleston. And that's how we did our revamp in 2016.
I mean, it took gumption to, be able to do that, to kind of start from scratch in a way
Yeah. Oh, we
in what you were
did.
doing. And
Yes.
I really appreciate that you're constantly innovating and evolving. And I think you're still doing that. And to me, that
Definitely.
is this key to lasting success, is being willing to evolve.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Everybody around here knows. When I hire people, I say like we are always changing. You cannot expect that we're going to get comfortable ever. So if you're not okay with pretty much a constant change, then it's not the place to work. Because really, I'm out to be the best, and that best doesn't have to be the biggest. It doesn't have to be the most funded, but like we're going to be the best every single day. However, the best looks like, we're showing up the best, and we're always, I mean, look at Columbia. We opened Columbia, and next year we're hoping to open a third location in the upstate of South Carolina, and then we want to have an evaluation, and then so it's, yeah, that's the fun part about it. I'm sure you feel like that too. That's business, right? Like that's the fun part about all of this, is that it's always different, and we get to kind of make the rules, and that's really really fun. I love that.
Yeah. And you are a self-proclaimed research nerd, and I think that comes through in the constant evolution. And I know that you spend free time learning about reducing recidivism and putting those things into practice. And can you just talk about how that constant research helps you?
Sure. So when I got really interested in recidivism, I learned about this model called R&R, risk need responsivity. And it's basically the most well researched and empirically supported model of criminal rehabilitation that we have. And so I thought, well, I'm going to use this model, and I'm going to design the program based on that, which has been really fabulous. But there's a really big gap between principles and the application in actual like community programming. So a lot of my work sits in between those two worlds, which is really really fun, because I get to understand what the research and data says when it comes to certain principles, and then I get to actually apply them and see how it actually works. So we've had to throw some things out, like it's just not going to work here. We've had to modify some other things. Like I'll give you an example. We first tried to do this as a cohort because we wanted to cognitive behavioral, the curriculum that we were using at the time, cognitive behavioral curriculum, the best practice, if you're going to use it based on its own evidence and the results that show it works, you need to use it as it was intended and designed, right? You can't just start meddling with things and thinking you're going to get the same result. Well, it was intended and designed to be run as a closed-ended group, which means that people start on a certain day and then they go to the end of that, and then you restart again, right? And it just didn't work for us. And we brought in an expert to help us, you know what I mean, make sure we stayed according to the evidence-based practice of it and all this stuff. And we literally hired somebody to come down here and try to help us figure it out. At the end of the day, I was like, you know what? It's just not working for us. We're just not going to do it like that. Like, I'm sorry, we're just not going to do it like that. And we just threw it out. And we're like, you know what? We're going to be an open enrollment curriculum, which means like, hey, you know what? You might not get as great of a result if you come in the middle of the problem solving module, but we don't care. We want you to start on Tuesday in the middle of the problem solving module because we want you to start on Tuesday, right? And so I used to be like kind of rigid, and like I wanted it to be like just so, and I wanted it to be just perfect. But I've gotten a lot less like rigid about things when I'm recognizing like it needs to work, right? There's perfect, and then there's working. And I think I might have mentioned this to you about Columbia. Like I'm one of the first ones to want to change things, even though it's my baby, right? Where like, so for example, we've been teaching 3 hours of classes and a half day of a print shop for, I don't know, years, right? And so the guys come in, they're in 3 hours of classes from 9 to 12. They take an hour lunch, and then they're in the print shops screen printing for the rest of the day. Well, I started saying last year when we were getting ready to open the second location, I just don't think 3 hours of classes is going to be a scalable model. it works here in a boutique shop, but you try to like scale that, you're talking about 3 hours of cognitive. I mean, how many centers can we replicate that can provide high quality CBT at that like level? And if our facilitator quits, and I was just like, I just don't think it's manageable. And so I pitched it to my staff, and well, half of my staff are program graduates, right? I've got 5 out of 12 of us are program graduates. Um, they hated the idea. The rest of my staff were okay, but they hated it because they came through and loved the classes. And were like, that was the thing that helped me change, Amy. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, I get it, but it's just not scalable. Right. But I relented. I polled everybody, polled all the current participants, and polled my staff. And people, no, they're like, no, we need it. I'm like, all right. So we launched in Columbia 3 months in, like, it's not scalable. So we switched it just a couple months ago. We switched it. It's less treatment hours, right? It's less it's less based on our theoretical model, but it's more scalable. And at the end of the day, like, we're really trying to create something that we can bring to the people that we're trying to work for, not just something that like looks perfect based on paper or based on, a theory. So it's been really interesting and really fun for me. That's actually where I find my sweet spot, is like understanding criminal justice research and then applying it. It also has kept me very focused and dialed in on exactly what our model is. Like, as you can imagine, people have asked me to do like a million things over the years, right? Like gardening, dog therapy, music therapy, drumming, meditation, art therapy. You know what I mean? It goes on and on, like on and on. Culinary, like everything. I'm always like, nope, nope, nope. Like, I'm always like a no. When people talk about having a hard time saying no, I'm like, I say no pretty much to everything, because we have our model. This is based on science, and that's what we do. We don't do anything else. But just recently, I'm starting to get like a little more flexible on help. We're going to start introducing some GED training, and also some like more intentional GED like classes here, and then more intentional like computer literacy and technology training. And that's a little bit of a swerve for me. Before, I'm like, we're just doing CBT. Scientific research shows that developing thinking, and problem solving skills are the main drivers of recidivism. Like, we're not moving off that. But I think really, when you're talking about showing up for people that are saying things like, I really want to get my GED, or I really feel like having computer skills is going to help me in life, like, you need to start listening to the people that you're working for. So for me, I feel like I'm very rigid to the science, and time and experience has taught me to become a little less rigid, which is interesting because most people are probably the opposite, I'm guessing. And the other thing that's kind of interesting, I think, and then maybe this is just for folks that are really in this field, is that a lot of social enterprises, and I know you actually have one out in Denver, and I'm not sure if we talked about it, but there's an organization out in Denver called Production with a Purpose. Did we talk about that? I'm
We
not
talked about
sure.
Mile High Workshop.
Yes. Oh, that's Mile High. That's their slogan: Production with a Purpose. The Mile High
Got it. Got
Workshop.
it.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm actually going to be out there, and so I'm gonna visit them. But most organizations like that are really amazing and doing social enterprise work with a similar population started the business and hire people, and then they're trying to back end wrap around in therapeutic services. Where we started out, I started this out as a CBT model, right, as a cognitive behavioral model, and then I launched the screen printing business on top of it in 2017. And so it's been kind of interesting that we've had to really focus on developing the business side, but our therapeutic side is super strong. But most
Yeah.
people that are in the social enterprise lane, it's the opposite. They design the
Right.
business, and their business model is strong, but they're trying to figure out how to bring in therapeutic and supportive services in like a meaningful way into the workday.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, and I hope you find some business models that work really well for you. And you've talked a bit about potentially scaling. What would you say is your long-term vision for Turn 90?
We My vision is to create an organization that is an evidence-based organization, and that really means that we need to have multiple high-quality impact evaluations to show that the program truly is working to reduce recidivism. That's my dream. That's my mountaintop. I don't know what happens after we get there, right? I mean, there's the challenge of creating something that nobody else can do, right? Or that it's like that we have to own. There's a challenge of getting it out there once you've created something that truly does work, right? Like, but I think first things first, which is to develop an organization that we can show works. So I'm a data person. I'm a person who really wants to create something that we can say works. And so I think that's my long term goal is to do that. In order to do that, we're going to need to continue to open additional Turn 90 locations, show that we can replicate it, have evaluations that show that it works. Have me step away to some extent and see if it works. Right? It doesn't need to be something that's driven by me. Does the model work? Does the model work independently of the founder? That's going to be an important step at some point. Is for me to step away. It doesn't necessarily mean I need to have to step away as the executive director, but can another organization run this? Can it run outside? Can it run and live outside of me? Like that's the goal. Like I don't want to run this thing forever. I
Yeah.
want to create
It's
a model
important.
that can. Yeah, it is
It's
important, and
important
the
that
other
you're
thing,
acknowledging it too,
yeah,
that you're not glued to it and saying you have to be because it needs to work without you.
it needs to work without me. I want it. That's the whole goal. And even if, it doesn't have to be turn 90s. Like I want there to be specialized services for people coming out of prison. And this is one example of how we can do it. It doesn't have to be the only example. It's just our example. And I'm hoping that we can run the fastest mile in our space. The goal is to run the fastest mile in our space. So other people will come behind us and run a faster mile.
Yeah.
However that looks like, we want to move the whole field forward. And if we can show up and be the best every day and be super competitive around trying to be the best, then we feel like other people will too.
Yeah. Setting the example. I can certainly appreciate that. I saw that you've worked with some really incredible people along the way, such as Mark Zuckerberg, Sally Yates, Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott, among others. Has anyone in particular stood out in terms of their passion for lessening recidivism?
It's been really, really cool to see this topic get elevated and for me to sort of just serendipitously be here right now when people kind of care about it. So, there's this like I, started this, whatever, 10 years ago. It's now, so we have some track record. All of a sudden people care about it, and we're right here in this crosshair. And oh, I'm like sort of at the pinnacle of my working years and my career. And so when I step back off of that, I kind of see how all of that kind of came together in this perfect storm for me. If I was 10 years older, if I was 10 years younger, right? Like all of those things really would have mattered for me to just be at the right moment at the right time. And so I talk to people sometimes about, I look at life like the breadcrumbs, right? And when I meet people that are high profile and care about this and are interested in the work I'm doing, I just see it as like another breadcrumb that I'm on the right track and that we are gonna run that mile and we're heading in the right direction. And so I don't know if I directly answered your question as to if anybody stood out, but
No.
they all stand out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They all stand out to me every time. Every time we have someone, Cory Booker is like, we're anyone who's like, high profile, and I see, I'm like, oh, it's a breadcrumb. Oh, it's a breadcrumb because
Yeah.
we need those breadcrumbs. I've been grinding now for a minute,
Yeah.
and grinding from nothing will wear you down, and there's a lot of shooting stars out here too, and it's hard to stay focused and be like, that person's getting, acclaims, and it's just like you want to just like stay focused, and so when we do get people that care about the work that we're doing, I just always think breadcrumb, right? Like
Yeah.
we're gonna get there. um so
Yeah. It's
yeah.
definitely exciting to see that people are recognizing the needs here more and that we're hopefully moving in the right direction on that front. And earlier you shared a story of when the judge in Charleston wanted to meet you. She wanted to meet the person behind the magic that was happening. And it sounded like that was a really important moment where you saw how your work could really affect change.
Hmm.
Have there been any other moments, maybe with participants in your program, where someone's come up to you and you've just been able to see how impactful your work can truly be?
I'm gonna. It's a great question. I'm gonna answer it. I think in two ways. One is all the time, and the other one is I'm always scared to death that it's not working. Right, like both of those things happen all the time for me. Like there's never just like a eureka moment where like, oh my god, it's like I have the eureka moment, then I'm like, oh my god, it's not gonna work. Oh my god, look at this. Oh my god, it's not gonna work. I feel like I have that all the time, and I have to remind myself that I have them all the time, so I don't get too attached to one or the other. But there's always been moments of just like, when you're just like in your zone. I don't know if it's like sports or on a podcast or whatever. You're just like, hell yeah. right? You're just like, you just like feel it and you're just like in a vibe. Like I've taught so many classes where I was just like, yes, like I see like this happening like right now. Um, or I would just like stop and I would like look back and like look across the room and I would just see like a victim engaging with all of the guys. And I would just like just have, these like moments. I mean, MSNBC came in and a lot of people don't know this, the lockup show anymore, but MSNBC used to run a show called Lockup or Locked Up. Um, and they would go to different jails and it was kind of like the dramatized show behind the scenes of a jail. And they were doing the Charleston County jail when I was teaching in there, and they got mic'd up and we did interviews and they filmed us and all that. And so I kind of got to third party step back and like watch us like on film, watch it happening. And I was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like it's happening, and I've had so many of those moments. I mean, you don't meet like Mark Zuckerberg and then think like, oh my God, like it's happening, like, right. Or, um, like so we one of my big concerns was that this was like a magical unicorn kind of program in Charleston that had to be me and I had to be here to do it, and donors would say, I'm a little bit worried about supporting your long-term vision because you're only one person. So I was worried, like I'm always about the show and prove, like I'm going to show and prove, right, that this can happen. And I've been doing that from the very beginning. But Columbia was a huge show and prove. Was it doesn't have to be me. So 3 out of 4 of my staff in Columbia are program graduates running that center. Nothing makes me more proud than knowing that 3 of my staff in that center are making the magic happen and they are crushing it. And I go out there every other week for 3 days. That's when you met me out there. And I basically just tour people. I get the sheriff to come out. I get the city council. I get a senator, right? And I trust that my staff has done what they need to do so that when I bring people there, it looks just like you did when you showed up. That is not a facade. That is what is happening every time I bring somebody, and I just trust that they do it. And then we have those conversations in those classrooms. I didn't teach a single person that you met that day. I didn't work with a single person in the print shop that you met that day. And yet all of those people basically said that they were having a profound experience with us at Turn 90, and that they felt heard and cared and listened to, and that they were having an inflection point in their own life. And so every time I tour somebody there in Columbia now, I have that moment, like it's happening. And then of course we have dropouts. We have grants that we don't get. Like we just found out we might not be getting a big chunk of money I thought we were going to be getting, you know what I mean? And then like, oh my God, it's all going to fall apart. Right. Or like, oh my God, well, a whole bunch of people dropped out. Right. Or like, oh, we have low enrollment. Right. I mean, it's just like, it's always something. Oh my God, we're not going to be able to scale the print shop. We don't have any print shop customers. Right. Like, oh my God, I'm going to have a staff member quit. It's just like, I'm not sure all businesses, right? This is the only business I've ever run, so I have no comparison point, but I'm sure business owners in general, right, feel those things all the time. And so I feel it on the business side or on the money side and the customer side and the staff side, but I also feel it on the impact side. Like, even if we get all the money, even if we get all the guys through here, like that's the extra pressure on a nonprofit is like, we still have to have a randomized control trial or a high impact quality evaluation and show that we helped change recidivism and help change criminal behavior over extended period of time, which is incredibly difficult to do. And almost nobody has ever done it. That's been shown in a high quality evaluation. And so I think there's doubt for sure, right? Like I'm going for it and I'm going to find out, but it's scary. It's scary to know that at the end of the day, like we're going to know, you're going to know, everyone's going to know. That's scary.
Yeah, it is, but it's awesome. I love what you're doing, and you can certainly see how it's starting to be a machine and run itself, and it's exciting to see, the potential, and hope to see it grow. And um, throughout your time in the space, has there been anyone in particular that you've considered a mentor?
Um, I would say, I mean, I think like most people that we all have a lot of mentors. I have board members. I have my board chair. I would consider him my mentor, and I call him my mentor. Um, I mean, I try to take the approach that I can learn from anybody, anytime. But I guess one of my early influences. I sound like an artist, but it is true. Like, right? Like, I feel like this person like deeply influenced and impacted me. I actually never met him. His name is Lou Tice, and he's deceased now, but he ran something called the Pacific Institute, and it was a video based. Well, I guess they did training and probably did in person training too. What I got was a video based curriculum for them, which was based in cognitive behavioral concepts. And at the organization I was working at when I first quit my job, we had gotten there was a women's empowerment program in that organization. and one of my coworkers, one of my colleagues, had solicited the Lou Tice's organization, the Pacific Institute, to get a curriculum for this women's empowerment program. And the organization asked us all to go through it as facilitators so we would understand the dynamics of what was happening with this group. And so I did. And so I went through it as a participant or getting trained as a facilitator. And that was my first exposure to CBT. And what I found out was that, and I had already been teaching victim impact classes in the jail. And what I found out was the Pacific Institute also did a series, a video-based curriculum for men in prison. And so I wrote the Pacific Institute, and I didn't have a 501c3. Again, I was just volunteering. And it was the same time that the judge was talking to me. And I said, would you consider giving me a grant? And they did. They gave me like a, I don't know, like a disc set and 50 workbooks. And I was supposed to return the disc set, and I never did. It's like it was like my favorite. It was like my favorite. I don't know. It's like I loved that curriculum so much. I just couldn't give it back, and they never asked for it. And so I still have it, and I've let a lot of people listen to it because I would tell them how impactful it was for
I'm
me.
sure they've gotten more than their fair
Right.
share of value out of
Right.
it.
Yeah, no, I think we're good now. I think I can say that now that I still have it, and I still have it. I've never gotten rid of it. So I incorporated this curriculum into the back end of my victim impact classes. So I would teach victim impact, and then I didn't tell the jail. I just started sliding in these cognitive behavioral classes that were video based. So I listened to the same videos over and over and over again because I would teach all these classes and it was the same videos. So the Lou Tice was the one that was on the videos. And eventually we ran out of workbooks. The 50 workbooks were gone, and I would still play the videos, and we would still do all the activities because I knew them all by then. And it changed my life. It truly changed my life. I so deeply connected with the concepts he was teaching, and then I listened to them so much. That's the really cool thing about teaching is you learn so much, and it changes you fundamentally. And now when I have my facilitators who were program graduates facilitating the classes, I know the curriculum I wrote, because I wrote the curriculum here for us, came out of some of Lou Tice's concepts. And that is now being embedded into the lives of the facilitators I have here who were once program graduates. And it's just, yeah, Lou Tice is like my hero. I'm deeply, deeply indebted to him. I never met him. Like I said, I think he was dead before I even got the curriculum. So it just shows you what kind of impact you can have on people you've never ever met.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an important takeaway for everyone. Sounds like he was a pretty great person, at least in this regard. And
Right. That's right. That's right.
so if you'd like, you can ask me a question.
Oh my gosh, I would love to ask you a question. I think I'll ask you the question I already said that was a popular question and that I answered. Can you talk to me about? I would love to hear about one of your failures, right? Something that you quote failed at, and maybe how it impacted you, or how it affected your life, or how you rebounded from it, or
Sure. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I certainly believe that failures are the best learning experiences, and all of my various failures have informed my successes. It's certainly something that I preach when I'm advising entrepreneurs and nonprofits alike. I mean, I have a lot of them probably as a guy that just I like go and start businesses. They certainly don't all make it. Um, After college, close friend and business partner and I started a restaurant that we had for a couple of years in Chicago, and um, learned a tremendous amount. We were spending 90 hours a week in there for 2 years, and built a great staff. Had great feedback on our food, and just learned an unbelievable amount, the amount of effort that goes into running something like that while maintaining a team and just, it's a difficult business in the first place. And, um, unfortunately it was like a social impact endeavor. Next door to us was Panera Cares. They changed their regular Panera to this Panera Cares, which was a pay what you can eatery. And it just changed
Mm.
the dynamic of our neighborhood, being in downtown Chicago. And we were the first of 7 businesses to close on the block. But looking back, I've learned an unbelievable amount. I mean, that 2 years was like 4 years or 10 years of business learning, of better than anything you learn in school, in my opinion. So certainly informed a lot of what I did in the future and in other businesses where I've had to build teams. I mean, that was transformational for me in running that restaurant. So there are a million things I would change if I was going back to start it again, but I learned a lot, that I still use every day from that. And I look back on it as a learning experience more so than a failure.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like offline I should call you up and get some business advice from you another time.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned that when we were there as well. Like, I'm happy to help think through business concepts for you guys, and whatever I can do on that front. I just really love the work that you're doing and the lives that you're changing.
We would love that.
So the one question that I've been asking all my guests is, if you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
Oh, wow, it's a good one. Well, I don't know. This isn't in my lane. This isn't in criminal justice world. So I'm going to go outside my lane just for a
Yeah.
second but I guess it is in the teaching world, and I do have sort of an affinity for that. And I don't know if I can snap my fingers and like change one thing, but one thing I would love to get changed is the pay for teachers.
Hmm.
I know that right now we're talking in South Carolina about increasing teacher pay to $38,000. And it's just really incredible to think about people teaching our children and just teachers, right? Making that low of a salary. And I just don't feel like they're paid for what they're worth. And it just has such a huge ripple effect. A lot of my guys just had really poor and negative childhood experiences in school. And if we could pay our teachers more, it would be so amazing to see the impact that that could have on our society.
It's a very great answer. I mean, teachers are paramount to the development of our nation and of everyone. And
Right.
it's,
And what does it say? Right. What does it say about us that we pay them that low and think about the other kinds of jobs,
yeah,
right?
it's,
That get paid
it's
so much
sad
more.
that we're losing the opportunity to invest even more in our future. And so I certainly agree with you. I mean, my mom was a longtime teacher involved in education, and certainly something that I recognize the extreme importance of. And it's hard for some teachers these days to stay in their roles,
Right.
monetarily and otherwise, for some of the difficulties that they get put through. So
Right.
hopefully we're going to see transformation in our education system in our lifetime, and hopefully we'll
Right.
include better compensation.
Be great. I can't snap my fingers for it, but it would
But
be
if
in
you
our
could,
lifetime. If we said, but if I could in our lifetime, if it happened, it would be great. And I find that because I'm already committed to a cause, I look on the outside. I feel like I'm outside looking in. It's just there's so much work to be done in reentry alone, right? Even in the direct service side of things, that you kind of, for me at least, I've kind of just like have taken a lane and just decided to stick in it. But I see things, hopefully are going to shake up in some other areas,
yeah,
environmental and other areas as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think it's really inspiring. Just honestly, how you've sort of gone about life and figuring out where you think you fit and what you want to do, and then once you find it, just really pedal to the metal on it and making change and not backing down. I think it's remarkable and inspiring, and I know that listeners are going to want to support you and your impact. What is the best way for them to do that?
There's a lot of ways, I think, to help us expand our impact. One is that we're a really small team. Most of us are just head down every day. We have one person that does communications through social media primarily, and so to the extent like we can have listeners out there lift up the story through their own networks and channels. That's fabulous. We really need exposure. We need more people to know about us. We've been called the best kept secret. That's terrible. Please help us not be the best kept secret anymore. Um, we don't want to be that. So, figuring out ways to share our story and to share what's happening here with Turn 90 is really the best way. Beyond that, we have a screen printing business that employs all of the men. If you need any kind of printed gear, any kind of merchandise, please call us, send us an email. We will print your custom merchandise and you will employ people coming out of prison. If you live in South Carolina and you're a small business owner or know people that are, or any business owner and want to participate in second chance hiring, we have guys that we are putting into the labor force who are fabulous. They're great workers. We need companies that are willing to step up and carry on from where we leave out our doors into the community. We really need some partners in the business community. And then last but not least, we are a nonprofit and we rely on donations. And if you want to write us a check or support us financially, we would love that.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. And hopefully we can bring some more people to the table just by you having shared your story. So again, thanks so much for spending this time with me. And
Thanks,
I look
Jeff.
forward, so happy to have you. I look forward to continuing to work together, continuing to help you push Turn 90 forward. And thanks again for your work.
Awesome. So fun to be here. I appreciate it. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. To find out more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.